At my sister's wedding, my father hit me with a solid cake stand after I refused to gift my $450,000 house. My name is Isabella, and I am 30 years old. Growing up, it didn't take me long to realize that in my family, love and attention were not given equally. From the moment my younger sister Doris was born, it was as if the whole house shifted its orbit around her. She was the golden child, the one with the dazzling smile, the sweet giggle, the perfect little princess. Everyone adored her. I was just there. I vividly remember my 5th birthday. I had asked for a science kit, excited to explore the mysteries of the world. When the day came, I unwrapped my present with trembling hands, only to find a frilly pink dress inside. My mother Marta clapped with joy. "Now you can look as pretty as Doris," she said, not noticing how my excitement crumbled into disappointment. Albert, my father, barely glanced at me before directing all his attention to Doris, who twirled in her matching dress like a little ballerina. That pattern became my reality. Every time Doris accomplished something, even something small like reciting a poem or winning a simple art contest, our parents threw celebrations, bought her gifts, and placed photos of her all around the house. When I won first place at the state science fair at age 12, I received a lukewarm, "Good job, kiddo," before the conversation quickly shifted to Doris's upcoming dance recital. At school, I buried myself in books and science projects, yearning for the validation I could never find at home. Every certificate, every medal, every honor I earned gathered dust in a forgotten corner of the living room, while Doris's dance trophies gleamed proudly on the main shelf. I learned early on that, in my parents' eyes, love was conditional, and I didn't meet the conditions. Doris was the dream daughter they always wanted, charming, bubbly, easy to show off to the neighbors. I was the awkward, studious shadow in the background, always too quiet, too serious, too invisible. Still, I never gave up. Deep down, a fire burned, a stubborn, unshakable belief that one day, I would prove my worth. Not for their applause. Not for their love. But for myself. And that day came sooner than anyone expected. The day I left for college was the first real taste of freedom I ever had. I still remember standing at the door with my bags packed and my heart racing, while Albert gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder and Marta said, "Don't spend too much time with books. You'll need to settle down soon." I ignored them. College was a revelation. In classrooms and laboratories, I was no longer invisible. My passion for biochemistry and environmental sciences wasn't strange, it was respected. For the first time, my dedication opened doors instead of closing them. Scholarships. Internships. Fellowships. I chased every opportunity and grabbed them with both hands. While other students spent weekends partying, I spent mine in research labs and libraries. My hard work paid off when I graduated top of my class, landing a position at a prestigious biotechnology firm even before I had my diploma in hand. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was enough to start building the life I had always dreamed of. A life where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. I lived frugally, saving every bonus, every raise, every extra dollar. I didn't splurge on designer clothes, luxury cars, or lavish vacations. I had one goal in mind, independence. A home of my own. At age 29, after years of sacrifice and discipline, I finally did it. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom house for $450,000 in a quiet, charming neighborhood. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect. A modern kitchen, a cozy living room, a small backyard garden where I imagined reading books on sunny afternoons in Minneapolis. Every corner of that house represented a part of me, my struggles, my achievements, my dreams. When I told my parents about my purchase, I naively hoped for a flicker of pride. But true to form, they ignored it. Marta barely reacted, more interested in telling me how Doris had just won a local beauty pageant. Albert gave me a half smile and muttered, "That's a big house for one person, don't you think?" His words stung, but not enough to dim my happiness. For once, I wasn't seeking their approval. I had built this life for myself, and I thought nothing could take it away from me. I was wrong. Doris's wedding had been the talk of the family for months. Marta had gone into full planning mode, obsessing over every little detail, the flowers, the catering, the dress fittings. Albert stood proudly at her side, ready to present his perfect daughter to the world. I attended, of course. Despite everything, I still believed in showing up for family events, even if I often felt like a stranger to my own blood. The wedding venue was beautiful, an elegant hall decorated in ivory and gold, threads of fairy lights twinkling overhead, and soft music playing from hidden speakers. The guests buzzed with excitement, laughing, mingling, sipping champagne. Everyone seemed wrapped in the magic of the evening. As I stood near the refreshment table watching the celebrations, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet ache. There was no doubt that this day was about Doris, about her fairy tale beginning, about the perfect picture Albert and Marta had always imagined. Peter, Doris's fiancé, seemed quite kind. He had a shy smile, gentle manners, and treated everyone with respect. In another life, I might have even liked him as a brother-in-law. I had given Doris a thoughtful gift, a vintage locket with an inscription about new journeys and love. It wasn't extravagant, but it was personal. A piece of my heart offered silently. No one made a fuss about it, of course. It was just me, after all. The ceremony hadn't yet begun. Guests were still arriving, chatting, enjoying appetizers. Doris flitted around the hall, radiant with happiness, her white satin dress trailing elegantly behind her. I stayed near the margins, smiling when necessary, blending into the background like I always had. But there was a restlessness under the surface, a tension in the air, a strange glint in Marta's eyes every time she looked at me. I didn't know it yet, but the night that was meant to be a celebration would soon twist into something entirely different, something ugly, something unforgettable. I was sipping a glass of sparkling water near the entrance when Marta beckoned me over with an overly sweet smile. Albert stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, looking strangely formal. "Isabella, dear, we need a quick word," Marta said, her tone laced with that familiar sharp sweetness that always tied a knot in my stomach. I followed them a few steps away from the main crowd, into a quieter corner of the hall where the music faded into a distant hum. Peter was speaking with his family nearby, unaware of the tension building just a few feet away. Marta leaned in first, her voice low but urgent. "This is such a special day for Doris. Everything has been perfect so far, hasn't it?" I nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. Albert cleared his throat, exchanging a glance with Marta before speaking. "There's something your mother and I have been thinking about," he said. "Something important for the future of this new family." I straightened up, unease growing. "You have that beautiful house now," Marta said, her eyes gleaming, not with affection, but with calculation. "And you're single. You don't really need all that space." I blinked, the words landing heavily, their meaning slow to take shape. Albert stepped forward, smiling as if he were offering me a great opportunity. "We think it would be the perfect wedding gift if you gave your house to Doris and Peter." For a moment, the world went silent around me, the clinking of glasses, the soft laughter of guests, all blurred into white noise. "You're serious?" I finally asked, my voice tight. "Of course," Marta said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's your duty as her sister. Family helps family." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I thought of the years of sacrifice, the lonely nights working overtime, denying myself vacations, luxuries, even basic comforts. I had done it all to buy that house. My house. My achievement. I shook my head slowly, feeling the fire rise inside me. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not giving my house to anyone." Marta's smile fell. Her eyes flashed with something darker, disappointment turning to fury. Albert's jaw clenched. And before I could step back, before I could even brace myself for the storm, Albert moved, and everything changed. Albert's hand moved so fast that at first, I didn't even realize what he was doing. In a furious motion, he grabbed the heavy metal cake stand from the nearby dessert table, the same elegant stand that had held Doris's engagement cake just moments before. Without a word, without a trace of hesitation, he threw it at me. The metal struck the side of my head with a sickening crack. A hot, white flash of pain exploded behind my eyes. I stumbled backward, clutching my head, feeling warm blood seep between my fingers. Gasps rippled through the room. Plates crashed to the floor. Someone screamed. I could barely hear anything over the roaring in my ears, but I could see the horror on people's faces. I saw Marta running toward me, not with concern, but with a snarl on her lips. "You selfish, ungrateful brat," she spat, her voice sharp enough to cut. "After everything we've done for you, you dare humiliate us, today of all days." I swayed, my vision blurry, struggling to stay upright. Around me, guests pulled out their phones. Some recorded. Others just stared in shock. And yet, Doris remained frozen in her white dress, her mouth slightly open in silent disbelief. Eric, Peter, from across the room, was already moving, pushing his way through the crowd toward me. Before he could reach me, a voice rang out, loud and commanding. "I'm calling the police," a man yelled. Eric, I vaguely recognized him from previous introductions, was already dialing, speaking rapidly into his phone. Marta lunged at me again, her words full of venom. But Peter stepped between us just in time, shielding me with his body. "Stay away from her," he growled, his usually gentle tone replaced by something steely and fierce. Blood was dripping down the side of my face onto the immaculate white floor. The fairy tale wedding was turning into a nightmare. Within minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Red and blue lights flashed against the venue's glass walls. Paramedics arrived first, their hands gentle as they led me away from the chaos, pressing gauze to my head. Behind me, I heard the click of handcuffs. "Albert Reynolds," one officer announced sternly. "You are under arrest for assault and battery." Another officer turned to Marta, who was still shouting obscenities. "You too, ma'am," he said coldly, pulling her arms behind her back. The world blurred again as the paramedics guided me toward the ambulance. I wasn't sure if it was the injury or just heartbreak, but the one thing I knew for certain was this: there was no going back. The scene outside the wedding hall was a blur of flashing lights, murmuring crowds, and hurried footsteps. As the paramedic settled me onto a stretcher, I could hear snippets of conversation swirling around me. "Did you see that? He hit her with a cake stand. I recorded the whole thing, it's all on video. Unbelievable, at his own daughter's wedding." The paramedics worked quickly, wrapping my head, checking my vitals, making sure I stayed conscious. I saw Eric nearby, still speaking to an officer, showing him the footage he had captured on his phone. Another guest, a woman I barely knew, approached hesitantly, holding out her phone. "I recorded it too," she said. "You can have my copy in minutes." Several guests volunteered their videos, their faces tight with anger and disgust. The officers gathered evidence, taking statements methodically, ensuring that every piece of the story was documented. Meanwhile, Marta and Albert sat on the curb, both handcuffed, both furious. Marta continued muttering insults under her breath while Albert stared at the ground, his jaw clenched in grim silence. Peter stayed close, refusing to leave my side, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides, tension radiating from him like heat. "This was supposed to be a wedding," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "How could they turn it into this?" One of the officers approached me gently. "Miss Reynolds," he said, "we'll need a full statement once you're feeling better. For now, we're treating this as aggravated assault." I nodded weakly, the pain in my head pulsing with every heartbeat. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of Doris, standing in the entryway of the hall. Her wedding dress was still immaculate, but her face was wrinkled in desperation. Peter's parents stood beside her, arms crossed, their faces dark with fury. I could see it, the cracks forming, the consequences beginning. The moment the ambulance doors closed behind me, sealing me away from the chaos, I realized this wasn't just the end of a wedding, it was the beginning of a reckoning. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, the devastation I left behind in the wedding hall continued to unfold. The once joyful atmosphere had soured beyond repair. Guests whispered in small groups, some gathering their belongings in silence, others shaking their heads in disbelief. No one was dancing anymore. No one was celebrating. Peter's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, stepped in front of Doris and the remaining family. Their faces were hard with disappointment and indignation. "This is unforgivable," Mr. Lawrence said, his voice echoing through the quiet room. "We will not join our family with one that tolerates violence and cruelty." Mrs. Lawrence nodded sharply, her lips pressed into a thin, grim line. "We trusted you," she said, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "We embraced this engagement because we believed in Peter's love for you. But after what we witnessed today, there will be no marriage. Not now. Not ever." Doris, still in her wedding dress, gasped. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, reaching out. But Mrs. Lawrence recoiled, as if burned. "This isn't just about today," Mr. Lawrence continued, unwavering. "It's about the kind of people you surround yourself with. The kind of family you come from. We won't expose our son to this poison." And with that, Peter's parents turned and walked away, leaving Doris standing there, broken and humiliated. Peter remained off to the side, watching everything unfold. He didn't argue. He didn't defend Doris. His eyes, when they met hers, were filled not with love, but with disappointment and regret. Slowly, the guests began to leave, murmuring awkward condolences or avoiding Doris altogether. Within minutes, the wedding that had been planned for months dissolved into ashes. Doris collapsed into a nearby chair, her dress pooling around her like a wilted flower. Albert and Marta, now in police custody, could do nothing to intervene, shackled by their own actions. The wedding was officially, completely, devastatingly cancelled. And it all traced back to a simple truth: their cruelty had finally destroyed the perfect image they had so carefully built. The hospital room was small but quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as nurses moved efficiently, checking my vitals, stitching the wound on my head, and wrapping it carefully. I lay still, my body aching, my heart heavier than ever. The doctors told me I had a concussion but no fractures, a small miracle, they said, considering the force of the blow. I was lucky. It didn't feel like luck. As I rested, drifting in and out of light sleep, the door creaked open. Peter entered, his face tight with concern. In his hands, he carried a small bouquet of fresh daisies, simple, genuine. "Hi," he said softly, approaching the bed. I managed a small smile. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," he replied firmly. "I had to." He pulled up a chair and sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything hung between us. "I'm so sorry for what they did to you," Peter finally said, his voice cracking slightly. "You didn't deserve any of this. None of it." Tears stung the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to cry anymore, not for them. Peter took a deep breath. "I know a good lawyer. His name is Scott, a close friend of mine. If you're willing, I think you should press charges. Not just for today, but for everything they put you through, your whole life." For a moment, I hesitated. Taking legal action against my own parents, the thought twisted painfully inside me. But then I remembered Marta's furious face. Albert's brutal swing with the cake stand. The years of being treated like I was never enough. And something inside me hardened. "I want to do it," I said, my voice louder than I felt. "I have to do it." Peter gave a slight, proud smile. "Good. You deserve justice, Isabella. You deserve better." He gently squeezed my hand, offering silent support. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. By the end of that week, once the doctors cleared me to leave, Peter stayed by my side as I walked out of the hospital. Together, we drove straight to Scott's office, ready to take the first step toward reclaiming my life. Scott's office was warm and welcoming, filled with dark wooden shelves lined with legal books and framed certificates. Yet despite the comforting decor, my hands trembled slightly as I signed the paperwork. "This won't be easy," Scott warned, sliding the documents gently toward me. "But with the evidence we have, the videos, the witness statements, you have a very strong case." Peter sat beside me, his presence constant and reassuring. I looked at the thick file on Scott's desk. Inside were sworn statements from wedding guests, medical reports detailing my concussion and head injury, and most importantly, multiple clear video recordings of the assault, every brutal moment captured in cold, undeniable reality. "I'm ready," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I want to do this." Scott nodded in approval. We're filing charges for assault, emotional abuse, and attempted coercion of property. Their past behavior will strengthen your case. We'll be seeking both criminal accountability and civil compensation. Hearing it laid out so formally made my stomach twist, but it also fueled something deep inside me, resolve. Within days, the case moved forward. Court dates were set. Subpoenas were issued. Witnesses were prepared. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Friends, extended family, even reporters showed up, drawn by the scandal of a daughter pressing charges against her own parents. Albert and Marta sat stiffly at the defendant's table, their faces pale and tense with rage. I took the stand and told my story, the childhood neglect, the favoritism, the years of emotional abuse, and finally, the violent attack during Doris's wedding ceremony. Scott presented the videos to the jury. The footage showed everything: Albert grabbing the metal cake stand, the brutal blow, my stumble, the blood that followed, Marta's shouted insults, the guests rushing to call the police. Every second was undeniable. The witnesses confirmed what the video showed. Eric and several others testified without hesitation, describing not just the attack, but the lifelong favoritism and cruelty they had observed over the years. Albert's lawyer tried to argue that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, that tensions were high, that it had all been a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong. The truth was too clear. The jury didn't deliberate for long. The courtroom fell silent as they returned, their expressions grim and certain. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my heart pounding inside my chest. Peter leaned in, his hand gently squeezing mine, a silent message: no matter what happens, you're not alone. The foreperson stood, clearing his throat. We, the jury, find the defendants, Albert Reynolds and Marta Reynolds, guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the courtroom, slicing through the thick tension like a blade. Albert's shoulders slumped. Marta gasped sharply, her hand grabbing the edge of the table for support. For once, they couldn't talk their way out of the consequences. They couldn't spin lies. They couldn't manipulate sympathy. Justice was happening, right here, right now. Judge Hamilton, a stern woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper voice, wasted no time delivering the sentence. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, she said, her voice cold and firm, and considering the lasting emotional harm inflicted on the plaintiff, I hereby sentence Albert Reynolds and Marta Reynolds to 8 years each in state prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 6 years. A gasp rippled through the spectators. And furthermore, the judge continued, they are ordered to pay full restitution for the plaintiff's medical expenses, legal fees, and damages for emotional distress. It was more than I had dared to hope for. Albert and Marta were immediately handcuffed by the bailiffs, their expressions a twisted mix of shock and fury as they were led away. Albert turned briefly, his eyes searching for mine, in 1 billion unspoken pleas, seeking any trace of forgiveness. He found none. I watched them disappear through the side doors of the courtroom, swallowed by the justice system they had so arrogantly believed would never touch them. When the gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, a huge breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding escaped from my chest. It was over. The years of neglect, the cruelty, the betrayal, they had all led to this moment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was free. The brilliant afternoon sun kissed my face as I stepped out of the courthouse, the cool breeze carrying a sense of closure I had never known before. In one hand, I held the final paperwork, proof that justice had been done. In the other, I felt the warmth of possibility. Peter was waiting for me just outside the heavy wooden doors. He stood tall, neatly dressed in a navy blue suit, a hopeful smile tugging at his lips. Without a word, he stepped forward and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. You did it, he said, pride shining in his eyes. You stood up for yourself. You changed your life. I couldn't have done it alone, I whispered, my throat tightening with emotion. Peter slowly shook his head. You've always been strong, Isabella. You just needed someone to believe in you, like I do. Peter took a deep breath, the world seeming to pause around us. Guests and reporters bustled in the background, but in that moment, it was only Peter and me. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. I know this isn't exactly a fairy tale moment, Peter said, his voice heavy with sincerity. But life isn't perfect. It's real. And I'd rather build something real with you than chase any illusion. He opened the box to reveal a delicate, simple engagement ring, understated, beautiful, exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen. He knelt right there on the courthouse steps. "Isabella Reynolds," he said, "will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision as 1,000 emotions surged through me: joy, relief, hope, love. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled me. I had survived it. I had risen from it. And now I was being offered a future I never thought I could have. "Yes," I whispered. Then louder, "Yes." The small crowd around us erupted into cheers and applause. Peter slid the ring onto my finger and pulled me into a strong embrace, both of us laughing through our tears. A few months later, we held a simple but beautiful wedding, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. No grand spectacles. No toxic expectations. Just love, honesty, and hope. After the wedding, Peter and I moved into my house, our house. The same $450,000 home I had fought so hard to protect. Every wall, every room, every corner of that house now stood as a testament to resilience, courage, and new beginnings. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just living, I was truly, deeply, joyfully alive.